My son blamed me for his father leaving, screaming, "You're the reason he's gone." He moved out and refused to speak to me. Years later, he discovered his father's lies and cried, "I was wrong." I held him close and whispered, "I never stopped waiting for you." His tears fell when he realized. He was always loved, even from afar. I was washing dishes when my son, Nick, came storming into the kitchen. He was 17, tall like his father, with my dark hair and his father's piercing blue eyes. But right now, those eyes were filled with anger. "You're the reason he's gone," he shouted. I turned off the faucet, drying my hands slowly. "Nick, I don't want to hear it." His voice cracked, but he swallowed hard, shoving past me to grab his backpack off the chair. "I'm done. I'm leaving." I felt my stomach drop. "Where are you going? Does it matter?" He slung his bag over his shoulder and glared at me, waiting. "You got what you wanted, right? He's gone, and now I will be too." And just like that, he was out the door. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to scream, to make him listen. But I knew he wouldn't. Because my ex-husband had poisoned him against me. Nick was my only child. I raised him mostly alone, even when Rick was still in the picture. Rick, Nick's father, was the kind of man people fell in love with instantly. He had this easy charm, this smooth way of speaking that made you feel like the most important person in the world. That's how he got me. But behind that charm was a liar. A selfish man who never cared about anyone but himself. Rick and I had been together since we were young. I thought we were happy, thought I had built a life with someone who loved me. But after we got married, the cracks started to show. At first, it was small things, coming home late, brushing off my questions with a kiss and a joke. Then it got worse. There were phone calls at odd hours, unexplained trips. Once, I found a woman's earring in his car. He had a story ready, of course. It was a coworker's. She must have dropped it. He laughed like I was crazy for even asking. And I let it go. Again and again. Until one day, I couldn't anymore. Nick was 15 when Rick left for what he called a work trip. That trip lasted 6 months. No calls, no messages. Just gone. Nick asked where his dad was. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to break his heart either. So I told him the truth. He needed some time, I said carefully. Nick nodded. He didn't ask more. I think he believed his father would come back, that everything would be okay. Then, one random Saturday, Rick walked through the door like nothing had happened. He had flowers, a sheepish grin, and an apology. He told me he had a midlife crisis, that he had been feeling lost. But now, he was ready to be a husband and father again. Something in me had snapped by then. I told him no. I told him I was done. That's when the real mind games began. Rick couldn't stand the idea of losing control, of me walking away first. So he made me the villain. He started coming around more, showering Nick with attention. He'd take him out for entire weekends, treating him to things I couldn't afford, new sneakers, video games, fancy dinners. And when they were alone, he whispered poison into our son's ear. "Your mom's always been controlling. She never wanted me here. I wanted to stay, but she made me leave." And Nick, being 15 and desperate to believe in his father, ate it up. I didn't know how bad it had gotten until Rick left again. One morning, he just didn't show up. Nick sat by the window all afternoon, waiting for him. By nightfall, he was pacing, checking his phone every few minutes. When he finally called, it went straight to voicemail. Days passed. No word. And then, after a week of silence, Nick turned on me. "This is your fault," he spat. "You did something." I stared at him, stunned. "Nick, I swear to you. I don't believe you." He walked away, slamming his door. From that moment on, I lost him. He stopped eating dinner with me. Stopped talking. He spent more time at friends' houses, coming home late without explanation. When he was home, he stayed in his room. The only time he acknowledged me was when he wanted to fight. And then, at 17, he left. I stood at the doorway, watching my only child walk away, blaming me for the choices his father made. And there was nothing I could do to change his mind. I tried calling. He never answered. Texts went unread. For years, I heard nothing. Then, one afternoon my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to. "Mom." The voice on the other end was older. Heavier. "Nick." My heart was in my throat. Silence. Then, a shaky breath. I was wrong. And that's when everything changed. I had spent years living in silence after Nick left. At first, I thought he'd come back within a few weeks, maybe months. That the anger would burn out, that he'd realize I wasn't the villain his father made me out to be. But months turned into years. Every holiday, every birthday, I waited. I left my phone on loud at night, hoping he'd call, even if just to yell at me. But nothing came. I knew he was out there. Mutual friends would mention seeing him around, but he never asked about me. If I ran into someone who knew him, they'd get quiet, awkward, as if talking about him in front of me was some sort of crime. The worst part? I still set a place for him at the table during Thanksgiving. I still bought his favorite cookies at the grocery store. I still kept the door unlocked until I went to bed, just in case. Then one day, I got the call. "Mom." My breath hitched. It was Nick. He sounded different. Older. Tired. "Nick." My hands were shaking. I was wrong," he whispered. Then, I heard something I hadn't heard since he was a little boy. He was crying. I gripped the counter. "What happened?" He took a deep breath, then exhaled shakily. "I found him, Mom." My stomach twisted. I didn't need to ask who. I found Dad. My fingers dug into the counter so hard I felt my nails bend. And he let out a bitter laugh, one that didn't belong to the boy I raised. He told me he was living in Texas. He said he wanted to reconnect, to be a family again. I closed my eyes. I already knew where this was going. Nick sniffled. I believed him. I packed up my life. I moved to Texas. And for a while, it was good. He paused. Until it wasn't. I stayed silent, letting him talk. He had a whole other family, Mom. His voice cracked. A wife. 2 kids. A house. The whole goddamn thing. I had to grip the edge of the sink to keep myself steady. I had always suspected, but hearing it confirmed still made my head spin. Nick let out a shaky breath. He made me stay with them. Said they knew about me, that they were fine with it. That we could all be one big family. I felt sick. He told them I was his nephew, Nick whispered. For months. I was his nephew. My knees almost buckled. Nick laughed, but it was hollow. And you know what, Mom? I went along with it. Because I didn't want to believe it. I thought, maybe it's complicated. Maybe it's not what it looks like. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt a tear drip onto my hand. Then one night, I heard him on the phone. Nick continued. He was talking to someone about me. He said, I did my duty. The kids got nothing to do with me now. His voice wavered. Mom, he was talking about me. I covered my mouth. Nick inhaled sharply, like he was struggling to hold himself together. I confronted him. And you know what he said? His voice turned cold. He laughed. Said, what? You thought I came looking for you. You found me, kid. I had to sit down. My chest felt like it was caving in. He didn't care, Mom. His voice cracked again. He never cared. I had known this truth for years, but hearing my son finally say it nearly destroyed me. Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, almost too soft to hear, I'm sorry, Mom. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I believed him, he whispered. I believed every word. And I left you. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, he spoke again. But that's not the worst part. His voice dropped lower. Something's wrong, Mom. I stiffened. I don't think I'm safe. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean, you're not safe? Nick let out a shaky breath. I think Dad's in some kind of trouble. And I think I got caught up in it. My stomach twisted. Where are you? I had to leave the house. I'm at a motel outside of Austin. He hesitated. Mom, he knows I know. And he's pissed. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Did he threaten you? Nick hesitated too long. I felt ice crawl through my veins. Nick. He didn't have to, he muttered. But I saw something, Mom. I saw him with this guy, big, older, real mean looking. They were arguing about money. And then, his voice dropped lower. Then Dad mentioned me. The next few moments passed in a blur. I asked where he was, demanded he stay put, told him I was coming to get him. But my hands were shaking so bad, I barely managed to grab my purse and keys. I drove straight to the airport, booked the next flight to Austin, and didn't stop moving until I was outside the dingy motel he told me about. I knocked twice before the door cracked open. And there he was. Nick had always looked so much like his father, but right now, standing in the yellow glow of that cheap motel room, he looked nothing like him. His eyes weren't bright with confidence or charm. They were hollow, haunted. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, without thinking, I reached forward and pulled him into my arms. His shoulders shook against mine. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered. I held him tighter. We're gonna fix this. We sat on the stiff motel bed, the hum of the neon sign outside casting shadows across the room. He told me everything. Rick had been scamming people for years. Ponzi schemes, fake investments, money laundering, things I never could have imagined when I first fell in love with him. The job that took him away for 6 months? That was him running from pissed-off business partners who wanted their money back. Nick had unknowingly stepped into a war zone. He was a loose end, a liability. And now, Rick wanted to make sure he disappeared. That was all I needed to hear. I called the police. Then, I called a lawyer. And by morning, I called Rick. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but the second he answered, I knew he hadn't changed. Babe, he said smoothly, as if I hadn't spent the last decade trying to undo the damage he caused. I was just thinking about you. I cut straight to the point. You know exactly why I'm calling. A pause. Then, he chuckled. I figured he'd go crying to you. I gripped the motel phone so hard my knuckles went white. Stay away from my son. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. Look, it's complicated. No, it's not, I snapped. You used him. Lied to him. And now you're trying to erase him. Rick exhaled through his nose. I'm handling things, all right? I just need to clean up a few loose ends. Loose ends. I went cold. He's your son, Rick, I said through clenched teeth. And I have proof of everything. Another pause. This time, longer. I pressed on. I spoke to the police. They know where you are. You're out of time. For the first time in his life, Rick didn't have anything to say. I took a slow breath. You told him I pushed you away. That I was the reason you left. But the truth is, you were never going to stay. I swallowed. You left because you had nothing inside you. And you could never love anything more than yourself. He was silent. Then he laughed. Not loud. Not smug. Just empty. I don't have time for this, he muttered, and hung up. 2 days later, Rick was arrested trying to board a flight out of the country. fraud, embezzlement, and multiple counts of identity theft. Nick and I sat in the living room, watching the news. Rick's mugshot flashed across the screen. He still had that smirk, like none of this was real. Like none of it mattered. Nick let out a breath. That's it then. I looked at him. He had dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Not for you, I said softly. You don't have to be him. His throat bobbed. I was such an idiot. You were a kid, I corrected. You wanted to believe your father loved you. He blinked rapidly, looking away. I reached over, squeezed his hand. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, of him finally seeing the truth. But now that it was here, I didn't feel victorious. Just exhausted. Do you think he ever loved me? Nick asked quietly. I thought of Rick's laugh. His cold, casual dismissal of the son who had worshipped him. I tightened my grip on Nick's hand. I think he wanted to. Nick didn't say anything, but he nodded. Like that was enough. That night, after Nick went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair he once abandoned. I had spent years setting a place for him. Hoping. Waiting. And now, he was home. But the years had left scars. I could feel it in the way we spoke, in the way he avoided looking in the mirror too long. He had lost so much time chasing a father who had never wanted to be caught. And I had lost so much time waiting for a son who didn't know he could come back. I wasn't sure if we could fix it. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting anymore. He was here. And that was enough.